Yo, good evening, good day, good day. This is Tech and Tarnetta. We're going to break it all down for you. My name is Stacy, which means resurrection, and Tekken is the obelisk symbol, and it represents resurrection. Tarnetta is the Kush land, that land of Punt, where my ancestors come directly from. We got a whole lot of people out here talking all this fake pseudo history that there's people that didn't come over here on the transatlantic slave trade, that there's people that don't have African history, that black people in America were never slaves or never went through slavery. And so we're going to bust and break that theory tonight. Excuse me, I got a little cold, a little bit under the weather, but we're going to get this out. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to start off with my family book, The Genealogy of the Little Johns, descendants of Bessie, Mesh, and Gilly Littlejohn, 1685 to 1993. Let's go into this because this is something that it needs to be broken down. But a lot of people don't understand that they can go to their own family history and to their own family genealogy and find out these certain things. With due diligence and research and asking questions to your elders, you might be able to run into situations like this where certain elders in your family, they got everything that you need. All you need to do is ask and have an open heart and be respectful. So let's go into this right here of some of the family history. It says the slave trade had its beginning in America in the year 1619, but the group of people, in parentheses slaves, that this subject is about were taken from Africa to England some years later, or about 1685. The record has it that Sir Edmund Andros, being a rich man living in England, had a group of slaves brought from the Gala country of Africa to England for the purpose of being trained as house servants. There were 14 in number. In the year 1689, the King of England appointed Sir Edmund Andros as governor of the colony of Virginia. Sir Andros brought 6 of his servants with him to America. Their names were listed as Betsy, the maid, Mesh, the cook, Gilly, the nurse, Harry, the horseman, Moose, the butler, and Ned, the yardman. In 1685, Oliver Littlejohn, with his wife and 3 children, Marcellus, Charles, and Polly, moved from Aberdeen, Scotland to Fairfax, Virginia in 1690. The governor, Sir Andros, and Oliver Littlejohn became friends. The governor appointed Oliver Littlejohn to oversee things around his home. Therefore, he, Oliver Littlejohn, was in charge of the servants. In the year of 1696, Edmund Andros returned to England because of his health. He evidently planned to return to America at a later date. When he left for England, he left his service in charge of Oliver Littlejohn to hold until his return, but he did not return. He died in England. Therefore, the slaves of Sir Edmund Andros became the slaves of Oliver Littlejohn, as was the custom in the time of slavery. The slaves took the name of the owner, thus Betsy, Mesh, Gilly, Harry, Mose, and Ned, formerly the servants of Sir Edmund Andros, became the servants of Oliver Littlejohn. They therefore were the first members of the Negro race to be called Littlejohn in America, or for that matter, in the world. This was in the colony of Virginia in the year 1697. In 1699, Betsy, the maid, gave birth to a girl. She was named Winnie. Winnie, was the first member of the Negro race born a Littlejohn in America. Winnie died in 1805. So here We have the birth record that's in the American Census, United States Census. Bessie Littlejohn, born in 1670, was born in Ethiopia. She had one daughter. In 1699, she died in Fairfax, Virginia. We just went over that. How about Mesh Littlejohn? When Mesh Littlejohn was born in 1670 in Oromia, Ethiopia, her father was 20 and her mother was 20. She had one son and three daughters with Oliver Littlejohn. She died in Stafford, Virginia. Gilly, the original servant of Sir Edmund Andros. Littlejohn was born in Ethiopia and died in Gaffney, South Carolina. She had one son and one daughter. My ancestors, they came in from Virginia and they only went from one country from Virginia. They left from Virginia to Prince George's County, Maryland, and then they ended up in South Carolina where they stayed. So they only moved to two states, but they move as a group and as a family. It says here that it should be noted that Bessie Mesh and Gilly were not sisters, but were members of the same group of servants that Sir Edmund Andros brought to America from England in 1689. Okay? And then it goes on and starts breaking down the genealogy. Then the genealogy, it gets a little deeper when it gets down here to Eliza and Strap Littlejohn. Who am I? There are six generations down from the three women who came because my ancestors, though they were not related when they came over here, they were all from the same country or the same people or the same tribe. But their children later on mixed in with each other because they only went from Virginia to PG County, Maryland, to Cherokee County, South Carolina, or to South Carolina. And so what we're going to do right now is we're going to talk a little bit about my grandfather, Strap Littlejohn, and my grandmother, Eliza Littlejohn, and their 10 children that they had right here. As you can see, they had 10 children. So let's learn a little bit about Strap Littlejohn. Death of a well-known color man. Uncle Strap Littlejohn, an old and respectable color man of this city, died Monday afternoon. Uncle Strap belonged to one of the numerous Littlejohn families on the Piccolo River. Before the war, he was a faithful slave, has conducted himself uprightly as a free man, and therefore has always had friends among the white people who knew him. So I can imagine that this is most likely a white newspaper, and they're writing this about my fourth great grandfather, Strap Littlejohn. My great grandfather, Strap Littlejohn, was freed before slavery, before the Emancipation Proclamation. He was already free. And so it's funny to me how they still refer to him as a good slave, but they also says that he was upright as a free man. And you're going to see that they always talk highly about him like this. And so let's see what happens. It says, during the period of slavery, there were several of the Littlejohns prudent enough to purchase or gain their freedom. Such was the case of William Littlejohn, the millwright, who purchased his freedom and operated a corn mill at Dawkins Mill for a time. Then there was Daniel Littlejohn, a blacksmith, who purchased his freedom with money he earned by working on holidays and Saturday evenings. He operated a blacksmith shop near Grando Shoals. Now, I want to talk about this because we remember when Kanye West had made that statement talking about slavery was a choice. Well, we all know that people were forced into slavery unwillingly, but there are certain instances when some people volunteered and put themselves in slavery due to famine and due to them not being able to support themselves and their families. So they needed some help. So they contracted themselves out for some years. Not only that, you had people that were slaves that had jobs. And when they had jobs, they saved up enough money to get themselves up out of slavery. So if you were working and you had enough money, you could buy yourself and your family up out of slavery. We heard these instances a lot. So for people saying that um slavery was just um forever, infinite, it wasn't like that because people could buy themselves out. You had some masters that just wanted that money. Maybe there were some who said no, but there were others who said, yeah, I'll take that money. Mention can be made of others who gained their freedom by other means. In this group, we can find Caleb Littlejohn. He gained his freedom by performing a heroic act, that of saving the son of Robinson Littlejohn from drowning in Thickety Creek in 1853. We now notice the case of a person that was granted freedom. Her name was Maria Littlejohn. In the year 1828, the mistress of Maria Littlejohn had a severe attack of typhoid fever and lingered for months. Maria refused to leave the bedside of her mistress and nursed her back to health. For this, she was granted her freedom along with her children, Strap and Lily. There were others that were granted freedom, but space would not allow us to name them all. So, as we can see right here, that Strap, as a child, was set free. He and his sister, Lily. Um, Next, we can see that this information is not necessarily corroborated by the 1878 deed, however, which says that Ellison Knuckles, Emmanuel Littlejohn, and Strap Littlejohn bought the land for $200 from Benjamin F. Dawkins, Sarah Dawkins, J.W. Tench, and Annie Tench. Oral histories do connect the later four names to the church's own, however, so perhaps there is an overlap. So we can see right here that my third great grandfather and my fourth great grandfather, Emmanuel Littlejohn and Strap Littlejohn, purchased a church. This same church right here is a church that my family meets every year in September for family reunions, the Littlejohn family reunion. So this is just like beautiful history right here. It's incredible. Next, I want to talk about Jilson Littlejohn. You see Jilson right here, A7, right under Emmanuel, my great grandfather. Jilson is my great uncle, my great 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 uncle. Jilson was recorded in the Library of Congress slave records. So you can go and punch up Jilson Littlejohn um, slave records, or just punch in Jilson Littlejohn, Google it, and his name is going to pop up. And go look at the records that my great uncle has of our family in the Library of Congress. Now let's read this. It says, I can recollect before the war with the states. I have a good memory. I can remember far back, even when I was 4 years old. I was my mother's third child. She was the mother of 13 children, 3 girls and 10 boys. Let's take a look. Emmanuel, Gilson, Eva, Butler, Annie, Hamlet, Edward, Frank, Eric, Junius, Henrietta, Rufus, Eddie. That's 13. I see Eva, Annie, and I see Henrietta. That's 3 girls. So that means there's 10 boys and 3 girls. Okay. She was the mother of 13 children, 3 girls, and 10 boys. My mother was half Indian. My mother was half Indian. This is the same Eliza who came from Betsy. My father was mixed with Caucasian and Spanish. This is the same strap that came from Gilly. He didn't have much Anglo African blood in him, but he had other African blood in him. I remember seeing his mother one time, and this was when she was dying. I was looking through a crack in the wall, for I had heard them in the house say that she was dying, and I wanted to know what it looked like to see a dying person. She had a turkey wing in her hand. She had a turkey wing in her hand, fanning slowly back and forth, as if she was barely able to muster enough strength to take the next stroke. She looked so pale and feeble. This was in the house where my aunt used to weave cloth and cook. He says another thing. He says, right here, he says, I joined the church after hearing that song. I was very devilish, but not mean. I tried hard to get religion. My brother, Junie, was older than I. So let's go check our data again. Oh, far to the far right at the top, it says Junius. All right. So he called him Junie for short. All right. Let's take this out here. My uncle says in the slave narratives, he says, then the Ku Klux Klan, this is, I'm fast forwarding to another part, where he says, then the Ku Klux Klan first started in Tennessee right after the war. They were called the White Cappers, and then the Bushwhackers, and later took the name of the Ku Klux Klan. A lot of the wrong done the slaves was not done, a lot of the wrong done the slaves was not done by the Ku Klux Klan, but it was uh, something to the Ku Klux Klan. Why would a darky out of the Dems and the best of them, sometimes they would kill them? Once they whipped my father. He's talking about my grandfather, okay? I dreamed that um, morning before he got whipped that he was being beaten, and so scared was I that I uh, jumped out. Excuse me. So scared was I that I jumped out and ran out of the yard. My brother was standing there looking like death. He said, they have just whipped father and brother. What's the brother name? Numlet? Something that. Let me see. Let's see what brother we talking about. Oh, Hamlet. Okay, there we go. Brother Hamlet, I wanted to know how he got out of getting the beating too. And he told me he had slipped out unseen and hidden. My brother that was whipped, left home. He was so frightened, he went to Columbia, South Carolina. Soon after that, around morning, my mother and sister looked out and saw a uh, went to Columbia. My mother's sister looked out and saw a crowd of men coming. Mother yelled, "There are the Ku Klux Klan coming for us again." They swarmed around the house like blackbirds. I could have gotten away, but I couldn't leave my mother and sister to face those horrible men alone. I stood in the chimney corner. I had rather they kill me than whip me, and the way I felt that morning, I was quite sure they would have had to kill me, for I wasn't going to uh, get whip them to whip me or whatever. I wasn't going to, permit them to whip me. The reader come, the leader come to the door and talked to mother. Told her they weren't going to bother her or us, and they came to tell her they weren't the ones that whipped my father and brother. They had learned about it and learned that the sentiment was that they were beaten by them. They said they knew father as a good slave, and he was liked by everyone in that country, not county, in that country, and for us not to fear longer. They would protect our family. But it was too late. Some of the family had already gone. So here, some clan members come bum rushing over to my family's house, beats my grandfather, beats my uncle, takes off. The clan comes back the next day and says, "We sorry. That wasn't us. We coming to tell you that don't fear nothing. There ain't gonna be no problem for us, and we coming to let you know that that wasn't us, okay? So chill out." Now, I don't know how to take that. I don't know how you would take that, but this is what it says. That the Klan came over there and it said that my grandpops is loved throughout the country. All right. But y'all say that ain't no slavery. Y'all say that nobody came over here with no slave boats. Where the slave boats at? None of this stuff never happened. No, it never happened to you. So let's read. It says right here, we met our colored friend Emmanuel Littlejohn at Gaffney this week. He is a representative man of his race and one of Cherokee County's most progressive farmers. He has lived for 37 years on the same plantation and has a lot of cotton on hand of last year's crop. He is a cotton grower's friend and is in favor of holding it for better prices. If all the men of his race were of his thrift, energy, industry, and honesty, lawyers, courthouses, and jails would soon be a thing of the past. We heard a moneyed man at Gaffney several years ago say that he would trust Strap Little John's Emmanuel's father, or any of his boys for any amount of money they wish to ask. They would give my grandfather's sons just as much or more that they would give any white man. This is in the newspaper. They posted this out everywhere. By the way, speaking of this, caused another case up of what the colored man can do by applying himself to business. We are always glad to hear of anyone succeeding when they can do it honestly. You see, this was a time where the European colonists, they were trying to oust all of the so-called free blacks. But the Europeans who grew up with my family was like, hell no, you better leave them alone. And we'll show you why. And so they were putting them in the newspaper and making an example. Said, we are always glad to hear of anyone succeeding when they can do it honestly. Reverend A.J. Lyons, the colored preacher who lives in this section, tells of a man of his race near Cross Anchor by the name of Shelton who runs 5 plows. He owns 600 acres of land and has bought his supplies for cash, to wit 35 barrels of flour, 2 barrels of sugar, and 15 uh, pounds of meat and lard. He made corn and molasses enough to do him and other supplies accordingly. We have one colored man in this county, Emmanuel Littlejohn, my third great grandfather, who was expect who we expect is doing as well as his cross anchor neighbor. He's doing the same as well as his cross anchor neighbor. Emmanuel Littlejohn owns 600 acres of land, bought his supplies for cash, 35 barrels of flour, 2 barrels of sugar, and 15 pounds of meat and lard. Made corn and molasses to do him and other supplies accordingly. This is what my great grandfather did. Who they expect is doing as well as his cross anchor neighbor. We heard one of the wealthiest men in Cherokee County say several years ago that they would take Strap Littlejohn's note for any amount they would promise as quick as they would most white people. Okay? And they noted these instances in order for record that they could show the success of what a black man can be in America, or of just what he is, period. But note that they said, if you was like my grandfather's sons, meaning me, ain't gonna be no crime, wouldn't be no use for judges, lawyers, jails, none of that type of stuff. All right? Straight up. What else we got here? It says, check this out. Immediately after the emancipation of slaves, there was a period known as the Reconstruction period. As we look at the Little Johns of the Negro race during this period, we find them taking part in the various parts of local government. Because of the participation of some of the newly freed blacks, people in government, some whites became very hostile, like I was just talking about. There were many attempts made by some of the whites to keep the blacks in subjection. The Ku Klux Klan, the Democratic Party formed the Ku Klux Klan in 1866. They did not want the Southern blacks who started just taking over office. They didn't want them to stay there. There were many attempts made by some of the whites to keep the blacks in subjection. There were such acts as beatings and even killings to frighten the blacks into subjection. Didn't we just read that? I went through that. During this period, there were several Negroes holding positions in local government. Among them were Reverend Sam Knuckles, who served as a member of the South Carolina legislature, and Emmanuel Littlejohn, who served as magistrate or justice of the peace. The blacks also took an active part in election processes of the government. It was this and things of that nature that caused the hostile attitude on the part of some of the whites. I mean, this is incredible. You go from being slaves, um, to having to sleep with colonizers, to having to have your family stick together, from moving from one state to the next state to another state, from um, going through all these trials and tribulations and end up getting your children free. Then when your children end up getting free, they become successful and known to be successful by everybody. Then after that, you start having children that become a magistrate, the actual judge. Come on. This is a beautiful success story. For me, what you ones is talking about, I don't care they call my grandfather a slave. What is the character of him? So let me go on and end this out, because I think we pretty much did what we needed to do. But that's Emmanuel, Little John, over there in the back, all right, who we was just talking about, along with some of my cousins right there. What's up, cousins? And so yeah, we're gonna go ahead and end this out. So we see how the six generations, how they went to strap Little John, all the way from Bad Sea down to Eliza and Strap, to Emmanuel. After Strap Little John and Eliza Little John, they have Emmanuel Little John, which it says right here. This is my third great grandfather's death certificate. And so, as you can see right here, it says name of father, Strap Little John, name of mother, Eliza Little John. Same stuff I've been showing. His daughter is Strathonia Little Johns. But when she got married, she married Jake Byers, my grandpa Jake Byers. You can see her father is Maine Little John, Maine short for Manuel, and Lori Little John, her mother. And it says right next to that, her husband is Jake Byers, right to the far right, in the middle. In the middle, it says Maine Little John, Lori Little John, and Jake Byers. Um, Jake Byers married Strathonia Little John, and they had Viola Byers. And Viola Byers, she married she married an Allen. She married Sol Allen, my great grandfather, and my great grandfather. Viola Byers Allen and Sol Allen, they had J.B. Allen, my grandfather, my grandpa. I miss you, Grandpa J.B. My grandpa J.B. Allen's parents is Sol Allen, Viola Byers Allen. Surviving his wife is my grandmother. I miss you, Grandma. Lizzie Allen of Cherrysville, North Carolina. One son, Rayford Gilliard of Los Angeles, California. Rayford Gilliard took the name of his mom, Lizzie Gilliard. When my father does music, he was going out of town one time, and he needed to like in the late '80s or the '90s, he needed to go out of the country, and so he went back to North Carolina, a small town in Gaston County, to go get his records. And the Hall of Records and the stuff had burned down or whatnot. You know how they say they be burning down. They actually burned down my father's records. So, as an intelligent man, instead of going back and getting the name Allen, his paternal last name, he uses maternal last name so he can get a brand new credit record. You know how business go. Go ahead, pops. But anyway, um, Lizzie Gilliard was with J.B. Allen, and she became Lizzie Allen. All right. This is that CISA delayed birth certificate up there. um, they say Rayford Gilliard up there, and this mom's right there. Say Lizzie Gilliard, right? Right here, state of Maryland. That's me, PG County. Don't know now you know. That's me, Stacey Lee Allen. My mom Viggs. My pops is Ray Lee Allen. So It went from me to pops, grandpops, grandmoms, to grandmoms, to grandpops, to grandpops, to grandmoms, to grandmoms, back to the grandmoms. So now y'all can see truth and facts. I didn't show no blood tests. I didn't show nothing. I just showed birth records that went from me all the way to the beautiful people of the Gala of Ethiopia. Now the Gala people, when it says right here that um, it says that fourth line, it says the Sir Edmund Andros, being a rich man living in England, had a group of slaves brought from the Gala country of Africa. What is the Gala country of Africa? Oh, the University of Chicago Press, the Gala or Oromo of East Africa. The Gala Oromo meaning free men. Just like I'm seeing people. The freemen constitute one of the largest racial groups in Ethiopia and a small minority in Kenya. In Ethiopia, they are concentrated in the southern province with sizable settlements in Harar and central Wallo. In the absence, ain't that funny? I got a grandma named Gilly that come from Wallo. In the absence of any census, Italian estimates clearly showing Gallup predominance seems to indicate there can have been little change since the 1936-1941 occupations. Satagata says that in Harar alone, la popolazione Gala representa il 46.8% della intera popolazione indigena. So they 46.8% of the indigenous population. So they take up thing they have, just that one tribe by themselves. All right. So what does it gotta look like? Gotta look like this beautiful woman right here from Talnetta, from this brother right here. It's real hair from Talnetta. This brother's right here from Talnetta. This sister right here, Oromia. So I'd like to give a shout out to my family, to my cousins, and everything Kemet, because these are the people who founded Kemet. One of the tribes that helped found Kemet, and I'm a part of that. So when you see Tech and Taneta, just have some respect. Know that there are people out here who can trace themselves back to Africa. I can also trace myself to Europe and trace myself to the indigenous tribes in America. But most importantly, I can go all the way back to the oldest people in the world. So on that note, I'm going to give me some rest. Been needing to put this out there because there's just a lot of folks that don't think that this stuff can be done, but you haven't put in the years of research, and when you do, you'll be able to find certain things, and there's more to be found. So have a great night and a great day.